Or not, Sarah, could you read the minutes?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So last time, uh, the board met on July 26th at 10 a.m. The members present were Justin Tully, Stephen Feeney, Molly Rickey, Randy Vertigator, Don Siegel, Roger Zavell, and Chad Fife represented the county and my absence. The meeting was called to order by Kevin Hunt, County Administrator, at 10 a.m. Advisory board members introduced themselves and discussed the election of the chairperson. Don Siegel was nominated by Randy Vertigator as chairperson, and Roger Zavell as vice chair, then seconded by Molly Rickey, and the motion was passed unanimously. Then they discussed the administration. The meetings are open to the public and will be live streamed on a motion made by Roger Zavell, which was seconded by Jeff McCauley. The county representative was prepared for discussion on the executive session. The board may go into executive session for specific reasons outlined in the regulations. Randy Rodeheater made the motion to enable the board to go into executive session. The motion failed for lack of second. Robert rules of order will be used to run all meetings, and discussion on whether the public will be able to provide input during the board meetings. A motion was made by Roger Zavell, which was seconded by Jeff McCauley. The board approved a brief 2-minute public comment at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, before the meeting is adjourned. On a motion made by Molly Rickey, which was seconded by Jeff McCauley, the board approved a quorum of 6 members, and a majority of the present will be required to pass the motion. On a motion made by Randy Rodeheater, which was seconded by Jeff McCauley, the board agreed to meet on an as-needed basis. Then there was a presentation of the Swallow Falls project by GPI Engineering. Kyle Smith of GPI Engineering presented the great information that was presented at a public meeting on July 10th, 2023. The comments from the board members were the design designed well, but needs simpler design. Many competing priorities, public transportation and public safety. Exceptions will be made in order to build a bridge. The preferred option is 1C, close the bridge and constructing the bridge in place. The width of the proposed bridge is 35 feet and needs to be reduced. GPI indicated that a 28-foot bridge meets requirements for federal funding, but they also indicated that a waiver could be obtained for a 24-foot wide bridge. There was no consensus on the board for what width of the bridge should be. GPI indicated that a 28-foot wide bridge would be necessary for the construction and replacement in the future. If a bridge is 24 feet wide, it would be necessary to close the bridge for construction or replacement. Discussion on aesthetics of the bridge is the stone facade necessary? The bridge on Sangamon Road and Mayview End Road was discussed as an option of what the bridge could look like. Board members will visit the site. Public comments. Due process is important to the board and so far has done a good job. Pedestrian safety is important. The sidewalk should be taken into consideration. Questions on how the board is convened and who convenes the board. Discussion on whether the board should meet at least once a year. The board is responsible for call a meeting, but the members need to be aware of activities involving the scenic and wild regulations. Can GPI provide options to see other bridge designs? GPI will provide some design options. On a motion made by Molly Rickey, which was seconded by Roger Zavell, the board agreed to look at the Swallow Falls Bridge as well as the bridge at Sangamon Road and at Mayview End Road and reconvene on Tuesday, August 1st, 2023 at 9 a.m. On a motion made by Randy Rodeheater, which was seconded by Roger Zavell, the board adjourned the meeting at 11:45. Corrections or additions?
Somehow I think I'm missing some of them.
Maybe that was a draft that I printed it out for you. Yeah, it looks like so. What was your discrepancies?
Well, my concern was meeting, the board meeting.
Okay.
My concern was that we didn't set up minimum of, say, a year. I think the minutes, as you read, I think is pretty much where we left it, and I think that's correct. But
Do you want to
I
show me?
would like- I'd like to make them to the meetings and today to revisit when the board meets and how I'd like to see a minimum schedule.
Okay. You want to wrap up the discussion of the minutes?
I'm entertaining a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. At this time, we decided to give the public a chance to make some comments before we get into the meeting. If anybody wants to have anything to say. If you would take and state your name. And who you are, that you represent. We appreciate it. Okay.
I'll stand if you don't mind. Good morning, everyone, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank the advisory board for coming forward and for playing a major role in this discussion of Maryland's only wild and scenic river. 40 years ago, I dealt with this issue as a member of the Senate of Maryland. A lot of the law that you all are looking at, I wrote along with then Delegate George Edwards, now Senator Edwards. Hard to believe we're coming back 40 years and dealing with it again. I noticed in the announcement, excuse my back. I noticed in the announcement that you all are going to be looking carefully at the management plan from 1998. I would also encourage you to look at the law itself. The management plan references the law. Look at the law and look at the regulations, and the management plan will jump out at you as to what the protections are to preserve the river. It's a lot more complicated than you think it is, and there's no question in my mind. I can speak to legislative intent like nobody else, because I wrote the law. Look at the law, and you'll see that there are a lot of limits to doing anything to the wild corridor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Board, thank you very much. My name is Mike Drysdale. I know most of you. We've had all kinds of businesses together. I wanted to first of all tell you, my wife and I own Frontier Resources. And that happens to be Savage River Lodge, Waunacokie Cafe, Little Crossings, Grand Mercantile, and SRL Outdoors. Currently, we employ about 70 people. And want to make sure that, you know, I'm not a Garrett County born person. I've been here for 60 years. I was one of the young kids in the Youghiogheny and Scenic River corridor that did the acid mine drainage abatement studies for Skelly and Lloyd way back in the 70s. So I've been in that Dock Canyon for a long, long time. First of all, I would also like to thank you guys for joining us. I wish that we could have had you more involved in the last couple of years, because it would have made everybody's life a lot different. Today, I got 3 hats on, and if you give me time, the 3 hats are the outdoor economy and related businesses. The second one is a trout fisherman. And then finally, I'm President Garrett Trails. Okay, so as I look at the first outdoor economy hat, I want to make sure that you all understand that Garrett County's economy has really changed. We are an outdoor economy. We are really relying on tourism. We rely on the outdoor world to get people here. We have a responsibility to make sure when those people get here that they do it, they are safe, that they have the opportunities that they're looking for. And just so you know, if we didn't have tourism and the outdoor economy in this county, everyone in this room would be paying about $1,100 more a year in taxes in order to fulfill the needs that you really would like to have. During COVID, we all struggled pretty hard, but the rest of the world found us. And now all of a sudden we're overwhelmed with the outdoor opportunities that we love. You know, this is a great place to live, to breathe, to work, to raise our families. And we absolutely are a 4-season business. So that first point is my business hat is on. And I want you guys to realize that you're responsible for decisions on something as small as a bridge. My second hat's a fly fisherman. I've been a fly fisherman for 60 years. I'm a professional guide, fished all over the United States. At Savage River Lodge, we're the only Trout Unlimited endorsed business in the Mid-Atlantic and in this county. And we bring hundreds of people every year to this part of the country. I want you to make sure that you understand and pay close attention to what I call the fisherman's parking lot. So as you put this bridge in there or whatever you do, I'm going to want to make sure that our fishermen, the people coming from outside, have the opportunity to still use that fisherman's parking lot and the fisherman's trail, which goes down towards the power plant. So that's really important. The fisherman's trail has been there for a long time. It's on the old rail bed. And if you never walked in there, I encourage you to walk that old rail bed. Also will tell you that in my younger days, when I was a crazy kayaker, we used to go there and put our boats in for tip-top yachts. And we would actually run that piece. So that is a boating destination as well as a fly fishing destination. My third hat is President Garrett Trails. Garrett Trails has always advocated for the development of sustainable hiking and biking trails in this county. Our plan has always been to connect state parks, state properties, private properties, and get the towns all together so we can have a better hiking opportunity and a better economic opportunity for the county. Garrett County has great road biking, great mountain biking. Garrett Trails has put a lot of time and energy in helping to develop all kinds of mountain bike trails. If you were around just last month, we had we call Garrett County Grand Fondo. Grand Fondo is our big fundraiser. This past month, we had about 500 bikers. Before COVID, we used to hit about 1,000 bikers every year we did this. This was our 12th year to do it. In those 12 years, Garrett Trails with the Garrett County Grand Fondo has raised about $400,000. We've had a direct and indirect impact to Garrett County in tourism to a tune of about $12 million. That one-day biking event has brought a lot of people to this county to bike, road bikers. And this particular piece is one of the places that everybody likes to bike. So that as you guys are getting ready to make some decision on the bridge, we absolutely think we need to take into consideration the biking world out there, the road bikers. There are some great single tracks at Fort Run, Deep Creek Lake, Barrington Manor, and many of those bikers do expect to be safe. And I'm a road biker and a little bit of a mountain biker, but after you've been hit by a car twice, you worry about the third time, because that third time might be your last. This whole thing is really about public safety. So finally, if I were to take all three of my hats on, I think that first of all, you all need to make the recommendation that we replace this bridge as soon as possible. I think the current location is good. Let's quit splitting hairs and make sure that we put this bridge back in there to protect us, the citizens, and our visitors who come here. I would absolutely recommend that you do a smaller bridge, something that's maybe not as fancy. I'm looking more for public safety. If you took that bridge and you geared it down just a little bit, I think the minimum would be a 24-foot bridge. I'm looking for two 10-foot wide lanes, a 4-foot shoulder. And once you put that 4-foot shoulder in there, make sure that it's identified as a pedestrian, walking, biking location. That will get people across that bridge. There's a whole lot of people use that bridge to walk, whether you're a fisherman, whether you're a kayaker, or whether you're a road biker or whatever. But we do need to protect. Well, once we get across that bridge on River Right, we need to protect the fisherman's trail and that boating access on the River Right. That's my 2 cents, and I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you.
I'll make a quick comment. I'll stay within this. Thank you all, and I'm glad you had a week to look at the project with Richard. That was really important. I encourage DNR to come. They're the ones that requested this of the county. And the recommendations that you all give are to the DNR, to the state, to say whether 2D, the option 2D is appropriate, and does, the GPI actually said that there's no way they can build that bridge without violating many of the protections of the act. It says that in their environmental assessment. So your job, I know, is to say, well, is what they're proposing acceptable? And to let DNR know whether they're I agree. I think we need a bridge. I live Steve Thorpe, sorry, I live a 4 mile upstream. I hear that bridge every night from folks who are it. I just like to see it as small as possible. I do have a question whether the footprint of the bridge, I reread the easement. It seems to, talking back, it's worked really hard to make sure that the state couldn't take private land. But basically, the county is proposing to take state land, just take public land, 2.5 acres of public land, cut 200 trees to build the bridge they wanted. When they gave the specs that required that, the specs didn't include abiding by the state law. It didn't include the management plan. I would have liked to have seen them design something that stayed within that, keeping the road open. I know that's important to people. The sidewalk. I really liked hearing Mike's comments about a narrower bridge, 24 feet. That was the original footprint of the bridge, and that easement, if you look at it, is fairly specific of where that is. So I don't know that people move right of ways that frequently, but taking state land and cutting ancient trees to build a bridge doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Howard Janowski. I'm a farm, property along the Yuck River up in the Crellin area. Okay. I own the Crellin Community Building. And I may be a little bit late in some of my comments, but we went through that with the bridge widening at Crellin. And it had been open now, Jeff, what, a year and a half? Yeah. And as we all know, that clear water is the main thing that we're after, clear and quality water. And I can tell you, since they widened the road up on 39, that the sediment control seems to be better. That's after a stream or whatever. And I own a large amount of land all along the Youghiogheny River. I could be one of the largest in that area of property owned there. So it's important to me that sediment control during and after is one of the main things that you need to do. What I'm also surprised is, and Jeff, you can tell me, the water quality up there and what's being done for the trade fishermen up in the Crellin area. I've noticed kayakers since they put the parking area in. I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry. Since they put the parking area in, there's a lot of kayakers come up there. Okay. And I see them float down, especially when the water's up after the rainfall. But I'm not sure what's being done for the fishermen. Okay. To improve the quality in the sediment. This gentleman here, I don't remember you, but back 40 years ago, I was president of the Maryland Wildlife Federation. Okay, I had 250,000 members in the state of Maryland. And one of the things we did was the wild and scenic. Okay, when they were just passing the regulations, okay, to make sure that the public and the integrity of the river was taken care of. I think now, is there anyone here from DNR? Like with me? Yeah, okay, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, you're a major piece, okay, in the quality of the river, okay, and the fisheries, which I'm concerned about. Being up in Crellin, I always say the southern part of the county seems to be overlooked, okay, and it doesn't get the attention that's needed, especially with fishermen. I had a lot of folks on the Lindley Clear Cold Water Coalition on my board. And there's a lot of fishermen that would go along, you know, and come up to Brown that the quality of the fishing was improved, and also the sediment control. And I just wonder, in this proposal, you know, are they looking at riprats or whatever to stop the sediment from coming down the Yough? I think that's biggest problem, especially to the trade limited or whatever's out there. You said you helped write that. I don't know. Back in Jim Grouchy, he was Trades Unlimited.
Yes. Look, 40 years ago, is a long time.
Yeah,
My
it is.
memory is, it's in the mid-80s.
Right. I was a little bit more heady.
Well, it started in 82. so
82, yeah. Yeah, but, and we always tried to make sure that DNR was involved. Okay, that we had adequate parking. Okay. And this was back even before it. I'm not quite sure when Wild and Scenic came in on the Youghiogheny River. Do you know?
76.
76, yeah. I know we were instrumental in that. We had a lot of issues on the table at that time. Yeah, so, I'm just saying while we're doing this, can we get in there and Trades Unlimited and some of the others and make sure we have proper adequate access to the Krellin area? Because it all starts up there, Jeff, right up there, you know, and make sure we have good quality and some type of sediment control coming down, which is the biggest thing. So I appreciate your time and wait to hear the outcome from the board.
Thank you. Sarah, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, certainly. Hello, everyone. I am Sarah Milborn. I am the Western Region Manager for all the counties, the 4 Western counties. I'm a native of the Eastern Shore and came out to Garrett County and attended Garrett College before I went for my 4-year. So I fell in love with Garrett County a long time ago. Maybe not in some standards, but it's been 20 years since I graduated from Garrett. But I spent a lot of time on the yacht, a lot of time in the natural areas of this part of the state, and it is by far my favorite part of the state. Don't tell my folks. But thanks for having me today. I have business cards with me. I'd love to hear more from folks if they'd like to touch base with me, and I want to stay very involved in these conversations. Thanks for having me.
I have one question, if it's okay with you. Okay, has there been any studies to bald eagle population on the Yacht River and the nesting sites? Have they been noted?
I don't know of any that have been done with wildlife. I would have to look at wildlife and heritage. I know for a long time, a local resident, Shelley Uphold, was doing a lot of studies, but I'll do some research and we'll connect and I'll get back to you. Do you know of any nests that you've seen?
Well, you know, I think it's more important that you know where they are, not me. Okay, I cannot believe that. That's a endangered,
they're
you
probably
know, it's a
certainly are.
federally protected bird.
Sure.
Now, understand, let's see, there's other sites that are along the rivers that the DNR is located, the nesting sites. I can't believe that you don't know where they are.
I'll get on that and make
Well-
sure that I do.
I don't,
Give me a
I
little
don't-
time.
I don't promote it, okay, because, you know, the tourists love to go see. Okay. Are there eagles on the Youghiogheny River?
There certainly are, and I know that there have been nests that have been documented. I just don't know exactly where they are. Give me a little time to settle in. I just took the acting position in April, so I'm getting to learn the ropes and getting back into Garrett County. So I'll know those answers.
Well,
Thank
you
you,
never
Sarah.
extends like
I do.
you
Yes.
do. Yes, in the comes from the website.
Right.
Okay, I'm not gonna publicly announce.
We'd like to stay a little more on track here.
I understand,
Okay,
I
I
think I-
appreciate the comments.
I understand, I think I am on track.
Well, you may be,
Okay,
we are here to we're charged with.
I would like for you to think that you would promote me being.
Well, definitely.
Okay.
We've tried to give you a lot of time.
Okay.
We need to move on with the meeting.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Um, Okay,
Just a quick comment. Good morning, my name is Dr. Ricky. I'm EMS Medical Director of the county. Since 2016, we live on the Yough River, neighbors, we've gone. I'm a very simplistic person in the sense that I think we can get stuck in the minutia of every single detail. And I think that's what we can't afford to do on the board. With all due respect, I think if y'all just focus on the point that we need a bridge. I think that's not the discussion. I think everyone realizes we need a bridge. Concern that I have is, I think it comes down to, do we shut down the road to replace the bridge so we don't expand the footprint and don't damage the road around it, and how wide? I think those are the two things. I think everyone realizes for economic development, it's necessary. For public safety, it's necessary. From an EMS point of view, I've heard a lot of people state that it's for public safety necessary to have a temporary bridge. Our EMS zones don't cross that bridge. So we really need to look at that, and we can look at all the maps, but Northern Garrett doesn't come past that bridge. Oakland doesn't come past that bridge. We meet in the middle. I did ask Wayne T. Merchma, who's the EMS director, what it would increase our response time if we had to go from Northern back to Cranesville that way. It increased our response time if we had to, the second unit, by 6 minutes. So again, let's look at the main. I think we can get lost in the minutia of everything. I think we just need to focus on how to get this bridge built. So my recommendation or my request would be, we shut the road down, build a new bridge on the existing site without disturbing any of the trees on the other side, and don't go wide. One of the concerns I have about widening the bridge and putting a walking path or a bike path on there, I'll tell you from public safety, the road itself does not have a walking path, does not have a bike path. How are we going to go from a shoulder that has no access for walking or to a path on the bridge? You're going to promote people walking on the side of the road, which actually increases the danger for them. Unless you're planning on extending a path from Harrington all the way down and building a path on the side of the road for people to walk and bike, I think increasing foot traffic should not be promoted on that bridge, because we don't have the infrastructure on either side of the bridge to handle the path for people to walk and bike as it is. So those are just some quick points I want to just, before the meeting, sprinkle out there, and then I'm sure we can discuss more about it.
thank you, Doug. Okay, we'd like to continue on to our business today. Continue the discussion of the bridge. And at this time, I'd also like for the board members to identify themselves so we know what you represent on this board. Appreciate that. So,
Yeah, Sutton Dean, the district manager of the Garrett Soil Conservation District. Roger Sabell, I represent commercial whitewater outfitters.
Sierra Wakefield, senior planner for Garrett County.
Don Siebel, I'm a landowner along contiguous shores of the Youghiogheny.
Jeff McCollum, and I'm not sure who I represent. I was previously a landowner and I'm not, and very active trout fishing.
Your seat is the non-adjacent.
My name is Molly Ricky. I'm a landowner.
All right, well, I'd like to try to get the discussion going here on the bridge. I have some personal feelings. Would anybody like to lead off with things that they have on their mind? Maybe we could build from that. If you want to hear my opinion, I'll be glad to state that.
I know I wasn't here last time, but I don't know, my planning specialties are transportation and recreation. I know we want to minimize the impacts as much as possible, and I would like to be able to pull that off. I do think I was doing some looking into, how we cross the Youghiogheny River, if there's like one of those points. And I don't think we have any plans of putting any other crossings to the river.
Yeah.
And the wild and scenic regulations like prohibit that.
Right.
I am concerned about. I agree that there are currently no facilities to, like, for bike and pedestrians in that area, and encouraging it is probably not the best. But I think in the future, it'd be nice to have, like, either trails, and that would be the place where they cross. And also there's that fisherman's access. People cross that road, that, like, right above the bridge, already with, like, boats in hand or fishing gear in hand. It might be nice to be able to have, part of the design, have a clear crosswalk or have a place to cross. And I do think we should have some facilities provide pedestrians. Maybe a wide shoulder is what that is. I don't think sidewalks are the greatest, because they're hard to maintain, and also ADA access and that sort of thing. I like protecting pedestrians, but I think, just making the drivers aware of them is important. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. Something that hasn't been brought up yet, the speed limit at that area is 25 miles an hour. I think that's an important thing. And I know away from that area, it goes back up to 45. Through that particular area, it's 25 miles an hour, and that, to me, is something we can consider. My personal opinion is trying to, well, there'll have to be exceptions, no doubt about it, to comply with the management plan. When that all comes down and done, DNR is going to need to make the final decision. That's obvious. The county wants to build a bridge. I think most everybody that I've heard is in favor of the bridge. Concern is how large will the bridge be? And my consensus that I get is that the bridge needs to be as small as possible, and still serve the purpose. It needs to look to fit in with the area, and I being a property owner. Oh, the other point is that is a zone 1 area in the river. Zone 1 is the most restrictive. And, the fact that the bridge is there, if it wasn't there, I don't know that it could be there. But, it is there, and we gotta do something about that. My feeling is I'm looking to a smaller bridge. I'm looking back, the area is very restricted because of being in zone 1 in the corridor. Most people don't realize that there is 3 zones in the corridor. I'm being a property owner, cannot have anything commercial. There's other things that's, we got commercial things that are going on in the river. Basically, is controlled by DNR, to the best of my knowledge. And that's important. I am not, in no way, I appreciate the fact that I am in the border. I have some land that is zone 1. And I think mainly because I do have some hemlocks that are almost rival those that are at Smaller Falls. It's not a very large amount. Anyway, if the corridor wasn't there, it's been, I think Garrett County would lose big time, because if the corridor wasn't there, I think we would see small camps, campers, small cabins would be all up and down the yacht by this time, since the management plan, not since the management, since the act and the management plan was adopted in 1996. And so I think it's really important to our county and bringing people here. I was raised in Garrett County. I recently traveled to North Carolina for about 14 years. I came back to Garrett County. The reason I came back to Garrett County was because of our school system. This is another thing that is a plus to Garrett County, which brings people in. There's just so much that we can do and develop in the corridor without destroying it. And I think it's very important that we do everything we can to minimize the impact of a new bridge or replacement of the bridge, I should say, to keep that going. I don't know. I don't have anything else right now to say. I'm sure I'll build on something.
Mr. Chairman, we asked that Kyle and representatives join us, and the engineers join us today and show us some different things. I would suggest that we let them show us the different designs and some things that we asked them to come to the meeting themselves.
Very good. I didn't realize that they were up. Yes, I'm sorry.
They've been here the whole time.
Okay. I guess I haven't looked to my right or left lately. So, okay. Go ahead, please, if you would. Kyle? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, I can go ahead and show you some different images. That my understanding was you guys wanted to get a better sense of some of the aesthetic options, barrier types possibly to look at in order to give your recommendation to the county. So let me start by, well, first sharing screen. All right, so as far as barrier types, there are really only two different barrier types that Maryland SHA now has standards for as approved barrier types. There's one steel railing, which, can you all see my screen? Which looks like this. It's got 3 tubes and a concrete curb. And then the steel railing can be painted any color you want. Here it's painted brown. And then the other type is just your standard concrete barrier, which looks like this unfinished. This is a photo from a crash test facility, so you know they didn't do much in the way of grinding out the form lines or anything like that. But you've all seen typical concrete barriers driving around, and so those are the two options that SHA has for this particular type of application. This detail here is for a sidewalk, which doesn't apply to us, or doesn't seem like it will apply to us. Another type of barrier that is crash tested, but I would say not necessarily appropriate for this site, is this type of railing here. This has a lesser test level than the other ones and can be a maintenance problem because it's not approved crash tested with any sort of curb. So you get roadway runoff directly over the side and can rust out these base plates. And then this one's also a fair bit shorter than the other two. So if you do have pedestrians or cyclists on the road, considering the height of the bridge over the rocky water, it could be a little bit more unnerving and potentially less safe. So as far as barrier types, those are the standard, the first two being the standard ones that would be available, either the steel tube railing or the typical concrete. And the concrete can be, as this is what was illustrated in the renderings that many or most of you saw, where there was also an aesthetic form liner stamped into the concrete. And so that's still an option if that's something that people would like to see. I guess I'll just offer a little bit of commentary from the engineering and maintenance perspective. Um, Concrete barriers are more durable and offer more maintenance advantages than steel railings. With steel railings, if they do get struck by a vehicle, then they're much more, it's much more necessary to immediately go out and repair them. And it's, you know, concrete railings tend to be able to resist the impacts without much damage, whereas steel railings, you'll have to go out there and do a bit more of an intrusive repair in order to reestablish the safety of the railing system. And then they're also more prone to deterioration from water and de-icing salts with all the steel and the connections. So any questions on the barrier options?
Kyle.
Yep.
One item I'd like to note about the maintainability of the steel railing is that when that type of railing is hit, it does take more time to be able to procure the fabrication of the replacement members. And in my past positions, sometimes those locations would have to have temporary barrier placed and such until all of that could take place. It is easier generally it is easier to repair and maintain concrete.
Yeah, appreciate you interjecting that. And for everybody's edification, Wendy's a former SHA district engineer, so she was responsible for these types of rehabilitations and repairs on Baltimore County and Hartford County bridges. Any other questions or comments on the barriers? I can, if not, I can show you, underside of bridge aesthetic options.
Dr. Ricky would have a question for you.
What are the state regulations for a road with a speed limit of 25 as far as crash testing? We're talking about crash testing resistance. Are we talking at a certain speed, or what are the minimum requirements for that on a bridge like this?
It's a good question. So there are 6 test levels for barrier types defined in AASHTO, which is the federal design regulations. And these types, this type here and this type here, are test level 4, which are safe for up to highway speeds with some truck traffic, or TL5 even. The other picture I showed here, this is a much smaller county bridge, like a 20-foot long bridge as opposed to a 130-foot long bridge. This would be a test level 3, which I'd say would be the minimum based on the design speed, daily traffic, and amount of truck traffic on the road.
All right, Kyle, this is Steve Stork. Your original design, the one submitted with your application, showed the fake stone. Is that just over the concrete barrier that you're showing, or is that not on the table anymore?
No, that's just stamped onto the concrete. Instead of a straight faced form, they would have what they call form liner, which are panels that they nail onto the form, which when the concrete's cast, it creates the contours that then can be painted afterwards, or just left unpainted, but still show the aesthetic pattern.
Thank you. Quick question. You mentioned that the state only permits 2 types of bridges like that. Can exceptions be granted?
Yes, I didn't mean to imply that they only permit the 2 types. These are the only 2 standard types of railings they have that they're currently using. Since a few years ago, federal regulations changed from 1 crash testing criteria to a newer one, which the acronym is for that is MASH. And these are the two MASH compliant barrier types that SHA carried through. But, you know, there are different MASH compliant barrier types around the country that are used. So, you know, there can be other options, like, for instance, the two bridges over Deep Creek Lake both use a slightly different barrier type. Sorry, my computer's a little slow since I'm working from home. But they're a concrete barrier with like a steel rail on the top. This is the 219 bridge over Deep Creek, which has two pipe rails over the top. And then this is the Glendale Road Bridge, which just has the single. So there, and I assume we could do the research and find out, you know, if there's some sort of hybrid that you're looking for between steel and concrete. You know, there probably are MASH compliant options available, and I think SHA would approve anything that was MASH compliant.
Kyle, do you know how wide that bridge is right there you're showing?
This one, I'd say it's probably 28 feet.
Hold on, I have,
Just by looking at it, that would be my guess.
Don, can I follow up? I didn't get my whole question out.
Okay,
And that is, it would be helpful if you could give us all the options. It seems that we have to ask a question as we did at the hearing. When you said there's only so many, and then we have to ask questions. It would be very helpful, I think, to the farmers and the property owners and the landowners that we know what all the options are instead of just giving us two.
Well, I mean, there could be quite a number. You know, there's 50 states that probably all have different MASH approved barrier details. And depending on, you know, the varieties, I mean, some may have more than two, like SHA. So I don't know that it's practical to give you all the options. I mean, I'm trying to give you a sense of, you know, something that could be scalable, so that you guys kind of get a sense of what the options are. I mean, really it boils down to concrete, steel, some combination, you know, form liner or aesthetic features into the concrete or not. You know, from that point, we can try and find something that fits the desires of the community.
So Dawn, do you know in zone one where we can find where it said, you know, we can only paint our house a certain color because of, you know, the restrictions that we're in? I assume that there's some guidelines for zone one for us to look at as far as like, you know, concrete or steel or the color, you know, you had mentioned painting.
typically bridges are prohibited in zone one, so I doubt think there are recommendations.
I know, but just like add all the
All
other
the other
guidelines
stuff.
in zone one to try and, you know,
Gotcha. To keep
minimize the, right, like, I don't think of.
So with all due respect to the committee, I'm not sure that the aesthetics of the bridge, the county or the DNR really cares if you guys like the aesthetics. Basically, I think that what they want to hear from the committee is how wide, what do we cut, what can we cut, what can we not cut, and what do you want us to do? And I think that's, yeah, I'm not sure the county representatives are here to tell us. You guys can tell them to paint it purple, and I don't think they will really care. They'll take your advice, but I think the bigger question in this meeting, because this meeting can go on for 6 hours talking about that kind of stuff. I think they want to know how wide. How do we rebuild it by whether we take out hemlocks and go around it and go to temporary bridge or not? I think everyone's. In my opinion, that's everyone's goal is to not disturb the corridor by letting them expand a temporary bridge or this or that. And I think if the committee could really hammer that down to.
I agree with that. Randy?
Mr. Chairman, well, I appreciate the interaction with the considering thing. You know, part of our structure is to have a structure meeting. We have a comment period at the beginning, which we did. We have our discussion. There was a comment period at the end. And again, we have a small group here today, and I appreciate every person's comments and your ability to stand up and want to give a comment. I appreciate that deeply. But I would rather we stick to the agenda as it is.
I agree.
I'm not trying to shut anybody up.
You're right, but once you open it up.
Once you see, that's the thing, once you start, then we.
Yeah.
I would like to stop.
Once you go over 2 minutes, you know what I mean, you let certain people speak and then you just
Yeah.
open it up. And that's why I agree with you 100%.
I would rather we stick to the agenda.
But I have to agree with his comment that we can really get in the weeds if we're, it's like picking out lights with my wife. Goes on and on. I think those two things, I don't think it's if a bridge, we've got to put the bridge back. It's do we close it and how wide is it? And I think maybe that's what our church should be to decide today.
I make a decision.
So one of the things that we're looking at with the barriers is also closing it for repair. So that's, I think where we're looking at the barriers is what we need to do in the future if there was an accident or something on the bridge with the barriers. I think that's why we were discussing it, because it could potentially be closed because of damage. The one question I would have for Kyle is if we put some of those form fittings onto the concrete to modify them, does that change the repair time for concrete?
I don't think so. Concrete's pretty durable and it would take a pretty severe impact to damage the concrete to the point that you would have to go out there and immediately repair it. You'd have a lot more leeway with concrete because there'd still be structural integrity of the barrier system. Whereas the steel, if you damaged a piece, you'd likely have a weak spot in your barrier system that if another vehicle hit it, they could go off. I don't think you'd see that with the concrete. But to answer your question, they would have to, if they wanted to match the form liner, the county would either have to keep some of the form liners in the maintenance facility or have another form liner made. If they kept the form liner, then no, it wouldn't increase the time.
Concern I have is the height of the bridge. It seems to me that the options that we presented, the bridge would be increased in height. Looks to me like trying to keep within the aesthetics of the corridor. We should not deviate from basically the bridge that's there now as far as height. That's kind of a concern to me. And I agree with the fact that we need to agree on certain things. We've all decided and pretty much we haven't moved on it, but everybody knows we need a bridge. What the bridge is going to be, I think the general consensus is it needs to be smaller than what was presented. 24 feet sounds really great. So that's something that the board can make a recommendation on, I think, as to the width of the bridge. Again, we're looking to work within the corridor and the management plan. So DNR is going to have to make some concessions, but they also get the final say. And then the county the county wants to build the bridge. Where the funding comes from, I don't have an answer for that. We're hoping that it can be a bridge that, again, fits the needs in that particular area. And the fact that it is anyone.
So I do have a question. When I went to the bridge to look, I took a photo right there at the bridge, said area closed to pedestrians. What is that referencing? It looks like right as you cross the bridge. Like, are pedestrians even allowed on the bridge?
Well, some of that is entrance into the park, right? I mean, as far as, if I heard right, when the DNR made their presentation, that they were trying to control that, I'm not sure.
Is that a temporary sign for the one-lane bridge?
Is it? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think that's the idea for that one.
Can I offer some quick context on the height of the bridge? I don't want to speak to everything that's brought up, but as far as the height goes, the reason that the elevation is changed with the proposed plan is for two reasons. One, to keep the bridge out of the floodplain, and two, with the offset alignment, there's actually a reduction in forest impacts by raising the profile, since that side, the ground on that side of the existing roadway is higher. So by raising the elevation of the roadway, you limit how far you have to go to grade out the project.
Hey Kyle, I have a question about the width of the bridge. I understand that to be eligible for federal funding, it has to be 28 feet. Looking at 10 feet for each lane and 4 foot for each of these shoulders. Could we get a waiver to have one shoulder 6 feet and the other shoulder 2 feet? And still receive federal funding, or is that 4 foot shoulders a hard distance?
I assume you could get that waiver. We'd have to go to SHA to be sure, but my hunch is that they would approve that.
Kyle, could you please share the 28-foot width and its relationship to the ability to replace the deck in the future?
We talked about that last week. I don't know if there's anybody that's
Okay.
at this meeting that wasn't at last week's meeting. I mean, I can rehash that.
And that's the width that could be repaired without closing the bridge, right? Right.
Yeah, if you have 28 feet, then you would maintain the flexibility to reconstruct the deck, superstructure, or the entire bridge half at a time without having to close the road, which would end this, ongoing cycle of shifting the road back and forth whenever the bridge is replaced, as it seems like that has been done in the past.
So the difference between a 24-foot bridge versus a 28-foot bridge, how many trees or like acreage? What's the environmental impact on that 4 foot?
We don't have definitive numbers on that yet. We're working through what the impacts would be associated with the 28-foot wide right now, but we don't have numbers that I could share at this point with any certainty.
Now, if it's 28 feet, can that stay in alignment with the bridge that's there now?
The width of the bridge is independent of the alignment of the bridge, so you can either do an offset alignment to maintain traffic during construction, or you can reconstruct it in place and detour. The width of the bridge, you could do any width with either option.
May I, does the board have any other kind of questions at the moment, or? I guess I'd like to move forward with kind of maybe making a few decisions, like starting with, are we keeping the alignment of the bridge, or are we keeping the bridge open during construction? Shall we start with that one?
Yes.
And then we can move on to like the other kind of recommendations that we want to make.
Do I hear a motion to,
Well,
do I hear a motion to go with Sierra's comment? You have a second? Steve?
yeah, so I guess, like, there's like two options. We can either keep the alignment or we can have it like, you know, moved over. There's gonna be impact with either one, but less with, you know, we keep the alignment. I guess. How long is the construction period is my probably biggest question here, like how big of an inconvenience is it for? And when, like, I guess we can make decisions before you can get timeline filed. Can you help me with that? Like how long would it, we have a bridge out of service? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'd say best case scenario, 3 months. Typical time frame would be a construction season, which would be something like
Spring to fall, so
spring
during
through fall.
like visitor season. Good to know. Okay, cool. So, but I mean, we're living with that Glendale Road right now, so I think we know what that inconvenience can look like. So, would like somebody
I
to
make a motion that we suggest closure of the bridge for the construction period and not do a temporary bridge.
I'll second that.
Can I add one thing to that? That, and I'm in agreement to, that we try and time it so that the bridge is finished, so that the farmers can hit harvest season, which is like mid-October to mid-November, that it would be done by then, or at least open so they can get the corn back across the road, if at all possible.
The other thing we need to consider is school system too.
So if we have it open by September, so we'd start in the spring.
It also saves the county money, that option. I think it's cheaper, right, to build if you close the road.
Could you state the motion?
Yeah, that's what I
I'm
want to
sorry.
clarify. So Molly, you made a motion to close the road, to keep the alignment.
We had the motion. Yours.
Oh, I guess my motion was to make a recommendation regarding the alignment of the bridge. Okay.
So can we all decide on that?
Aye.
Keep the alignment the same, is that what we're saying? Yes. Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Was it corn or was it?
It's, we decided to do this, wait and take comments at the beginning.
And at the end, okay. Thank you. Some of this has,
You'll have plenty.
okay, some of it has to do with the bridge construction itself. Okay.
So we know where, like, approximately where we prefer bridge. I suppose the next question is, like, what? I guess the width of the bridge?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend a maximum width of 28 feet in the construction of the new.
I would like to see the environmental impact of 28 foot versus a 24 foot. If it means additional clearing of a significant amount of old growth, that would factor into my decision.
We have a motion on the floor and we have a second. We have discussion. Second.
What was the motion?
Maximum of 20.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Molly,
Well, that would be my concern with you know, if we give an inch, you know, that's what it's gonna be, 20, but like if that means they're gonna clear an additional, you know, what, X amount of hemlocks for that 4 feet, is it necessary?
Molly, I think we'll find that the bridge, that the road leading to the bridge is at least 24 feet wide. Wide or wider than 24 feet leading to the bridge.
You know, I think we'll
So
find
if we
28.
stay in the same alignment, if, you know, there's gonna be modest amounts on either side of the present button that might be disturbed. But in my opinion, and I'm sure share yours, that it is far better than going through up around the north and creating a whole new alignment. That there's, it has to be, in my mind, it has to be the most modest impact on the area
I
by
agree.
maintaining the same.
I agree.
And I don't think it's the, quite frankly, the purview of this board to, as Dr. Ricky said, you know, we're not colors, we're not the barrier, where there's a lot of things that I don't think is within our purview, but within our purview is trying to protect the corridor.
Right, so then why not do 24-foot bridge? That's my thing, if we say, you know, maximum of 28, that's what it's gonna be. Then you're not gonna get back down to 24.
I would want to look at within that scenario, what sort of impact closing the bridge for repair in the future would also have, because that's gonna. Any areas that are repaired and
Right.
replanted after the construction of the bridge might then be impacted again in 10, 15 years when the bridge.
So the temporary bridge has been in place for 16 years? Has the bridge ever been closed for repairs in 16 years?
It was 2011 that it was installed.
It's a different type of bridge, though, as well. It's a metal bridge, not likely, it's not gonna be resurfaced. It was meant to be a temporary bridge, you know, I just, my opinion, I just don't wanna. As I said at our first meeting, there are so many competing priorities, you know, we're looking at one, I think, very single enough. You know, the fishbowl priorities in my mind and our board and our responsibilities. DNR has their own, county government has their own public safety, you know, and repairs, looking at the long-term thing. I would hate to have a recommendation that this board would give that would be something that could not be followed. Or would not be followed.
Randy, thank you very much for your input there. I think that's important. I personally, I'd like to see the bridge as small as possible, but it seems to me, after hearing these comments, that the 28-foot bridge would be something that is doable.
You know, I really like this.
Yeah.
You had put 2 and 4, 2
Yeah.
and 6.
I
you know.
also like
You know,
that idea.
you know, that's painting lines.
Things can be changed over time.
That's painting lines and, you know, instead of putting this, you know, the area where people might walk from the north end, you put it on the south end, close to the parking lot is where it's fine, where the stripes are wider there. And
Yeah, I do like that. I like to have the option for pedestrian activity, and also the nice thing, if it isn't a sidewalk, we can maintain it and sweep it better for bikers and stuff, if they choose to use that. The other thing I wanted to bring up about, like, the bridge and access to Solid Falls, so Solid Falls, the parking lot fills up, the entrance gate. If you want to get into the park, potentially you could use the fisherman's parking lot, and walk across the bridge and still use the park, so.
That parking lot's full before, I think a lot of people park there, so they don't have to pay to get into.
Sure, yeah, and I'm sure there's like that avoidance, so, but also people use it for fishing access and stuff, so, I didn't know if that was brought up once, so.
It was about
Let's see here, so. Let me make sure I have everything written down for me, and so, I made a motion that we make a recommendation, and then I think Roger, you seconded, we had a little bit of discussion, and then Molly, you made the motion to approve the existing, to use the existing alignment of the bridge. Roger, or it's there. And then, don't know who seconded that. Chad, do you have any on that?
I would say Randy made a motion, to make 28-foot wide road.
I want to go back to the alignment, I just want to make sure I have that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that one open.
Yeah, okay, so that, like, the alignment is still open?
That one, that was second.
Okay, that's what I thought, and then we also wanted to say we wanted to agreement period to have the least impact on schools and farmers, so if we can have any recommendations during the timing.
We have a motion to the top, as far as the timeline,
Motion regarding what? I don't.
the time to build, the time it takes to build the bridge, basically. You try to limit it to,
I think that's outside of our purview. I mean,
something we could recommend, right? That's sure.
or
And now we have the motion open about the width of the bridge. And. And so, yeah, I personally, I like 28 foot bridge, because we're keeping it minimal, keeping the impacts, minimal. Yeah.
We're beyond that, right? I mean, we've already voted on that. Okay.
we have a motion on what we were not.
Well, we have not.
We have not.
All right,
So
so,
call the question.
yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
The width of the bridge.
I personally am not ready to vote one. I mean, I don't know if it's the 24-foot versus 28-foot, how much of the environment does it, what does it impact?
Right, well, what is the existing, the old bridge for the temporary bridge put in, how wide was that?
20 feet.
It's 20?
The temporary bridge 20 feet.
No, I'm talking about the old bridge that the temporary was put on top of.
You know, you back to this last motion, Randy called for the question, and the way I see it is passed. Am I wrong?
Oh, that's better. Aye.
What's the question?
What are we voting for 28?
28. Maximum.
As the maximum.
Would be 28 feet. That's the recommendation. The maximum width would be 28.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I won't vote.
That's fine. You can abstain or
just
say nay. Yeah. Chad, do you have a head count for minutes?
What did Mom?
And say.
So do you abstain or do you say no?
I'll just say no, I'm not ready to make that decision.
What's for a maximum width, not for what our recommendations, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
maximum width is 28.
Okay. So I was thinking that was our recommendation, was 28-foot.
Yeah, just that.
I think that might be interpreted as our recommendation.
Kyle, do you know what the existing, the old width of the bridge was before the temporary was put on top? You guys have that measure?
Yeah, I was just looking that up as you guys were talking. The old bridge was approximately 20 foot clear with a 2-foot sidewalk. So 22 feet. And one point of clarification, whenever we're talking about bridge width, we're talking about like the inside of barrier to inside of barrier. So the total bridge width will actually also include barriers. Just so that there's no misunderstanding in whatever your recommendations end up being.
So the outside, it might actually be wide.
Wider than 28 feet.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, right? Who knows, like, I would just like to see environmentally what that's gonna affect. Like, can we get some survey ribbon out there and, you know, visually put it in perspective?
Kyle, in the presentation, it did have like the options. I was curious of how wide the bridges were in those options, because you actually do have a table showing like specimens like that are that would be impacted in the area and like the acreage that of impact. Is that relevant to 28-foot bridge?
Those were for, I think it was 35'8".
So it would be less than what is on the table. So,
20, yeah, the 28 feet would take away the sidewalk, which is 5'8", and it would take away 1 foot on each shoulder. So it would take 7'8" off of the bridge width. The
Okay.
barriers were included on that previous, but when we're talking about width, our conversations are referring to what I would call the clear roadway.
I do kind of, I agree with Molly that if we're between 24-foot and 28-foot bridges, that we should look at the impact of those two widths instead of 35-foot width that we've all agreed is already too big. And with that, we're talking about, current construction, but also closing the bridge is going to impact it and how that could impact it in the future. And I think that is important information for us to have. And one thing I also wanted to mention is when we're talking about the timeline, I think that we would want it to be in the driest or over the winter of the ground's first. What we're looking at is sedimentation and runoff during construction.
One point of clarification on the construction time frame is that the river, there's restriction for any in-stream work. So anytime from October through April, there can be no work in stream. So any construction activities that may encroach on the stream have to be done from May through September.
But there can be waivers for that as well.
Unless you
Right?
have an exception.
I have to look into that. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, there can be with NDE. Is that who regulates that?
Yeah, that's who regulates that.
You see here, Kyle, is it possible for you to put up that little table is it possible for you to put it up there?
I'm not hooked into anybody, but I think it would be worthwhile. I can send them. Or Kyle, could you go to page 26 of your presentation or share that? I think that-
Yeah, just bear with me a moment here.
I think that's close to answering your question about how many trees are impacted.
Well, and so the other thing is, so the bridge is 28 feet. And then that
construction area.
the construction is how wide would that be and how much of an impact is that?
The table had. Those answers.
It doesn't take it down.
Yeah, it does. There was no proposed
Yeah, that was for
24
35.
foot.
Yeah, so whatever goes into less than that, I think that it would give us an order of magnitude, or at least like in the within range.
Yeah, but we're looking at, two different sizes.
Sure, the
24,
24,
48 feet, and they were counting, number of trees and stuff like that, so we don't know the location of the trees or anything, so. I think that information is kind of what Molly was looking for in that situation. Is that 4 feet taking out 80% of those trees, or is it missing 80%?
Well, I think option 1C is the keeping the current alignment,
Yeah,
so that kind of gives us an idea.
yeah, I mean, we know the current alignment is the best.
Right, the current alignment's narrower than 28 feet though.
Right.
It's not gonna be less than that or the same.
These things are having a 35-foot wide clear bridge plus the other barriers. So anything that we're proposing has to be less than that. It can't be more.
But this is just the bridge location, this is not a width. It's not showing us the differences of the different widths. This is showing.
Not a 24 and 28.
Yes,
But
yeah,
this is 35, correct, Kyle?
That's correct.
5-foot bridge plus whatever.
yeah, so we
So
targeted one
let's
C.
just for round numbers, call it another 4 feet, 39 feet.
Right.
Outside the house, so that we option 1C. So if we take it to 28 plus 4, 32, it's 7 feet, no matter how we slice and dice it, it's at least 7 feet west.
Yeah.
And so that the impact correspondingly to that 7 feet west is what, nearly 20%. So I would expect the impact to be roughly 20%.
I would,
What makes
I
it
would
red?
guess, you know, like statistically, like.
You can't, yes.
Statistically, that would be true.
How much of a lift is it to tell us the difference between 28 and 24 with the impacts? Is that a big deal, Kyle? Like, is it?
It does take some effort, so we have to redo the alignment and profile because I don't assume you just want me to cut 4 feet off and leave the alignment where it is, because that would only cut 2 feet off of the side limit, you know, the alignment being the center line between the lanes. So we'd have to analyze a new alignment, and in order to optimize it, we'd have to analyze a new profile, then go through and you know, figure out all the grading and erosion sediment control needs, and then from there calculate the impacts. So it would take us a, you know, couple weeks to get that information, assuming the staff's available to jump right on it. We've already started looking at the 28-foot option, but we just, like I said earlier, we don't have that information ready yet.
I can say pretty much for certain, 28-foot option will look very much like the Deep Creek crossing. I think if anybody's looked at that, I know Randy has, we would be looking at something like that.
So yeah, this is the Glendale Road Bridge, and I didn't measure this, but it looks like it's in that range. And then the 219 bridge, I think it's a bit wider. Apologize for the lag on the
I was
loading
talking
here.
about the bridge at Youghiogheny.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry.
This one down.
I just, you know, with the pictures that Kevin sent us the other day and having gone down those bridges and off the cross. If that's a 28-foot wide bridge and the road is 28 feet, you know, it just. To me, it just looks very symmetrical and in keeping with the way the roads are. And Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe that in these options that we see 1C, that those are not the options that we're currently considering. These have the temporary bridge to the north. And so that impact a number of the trees that are gone and whatnot is because they're pretty temporary things to the north, as opposed to, I think, option 1A or 1B, whatever it was, you know, this closed road, because that option was rejected and not a part of these statements.
All option ones are going down.
The option that was rejected was 1B, which was building the new bridge to the side and sliding it into place. It just didn't offer any benefits and just added cost. Option 1C is the option where we would just close the road and build it in place. And I get the sense that nobody wants to see all the retaining walls that were shown in the exhibits for option 2D. So I think that we're really looking at option 1C versus option 2D. As the two that are, you know, for all intents and purposes being discussed.
Hey, Kyle, can you speak more to why option one has a larger wetland impact?
The wetlands are, yes, I can, sorry. So this is the exhibit for option 1C. The wetlands are on the south side of the roadway. So the options that shift the roadway to the north have less impact on the wetlands, whereas the options that put the roadway in its current location have more impact on the wetlands. So it's a trade-off of wetlands versus forest. Forest impacts are more on the north side, wetland impacts are more on the south side.
Thank you.
And I guess to the point, I think you guys were discussing earlier about, where the tree is situated. All these little circles, I don't know if you can see them, but these each represent a tree. So, if you can imagine shifting in this line 7 feet, what that then misses.
So is your road in this diagram, is that 10 feet for each lane?
This road is 10 feet per lane, right? So here on the bridge, it shows the 5-foot shoulders and the sidewalk. And then immediately off the bridge, it tapers down to 2-foot shoulders to match the approach on either side. So the wider width is really just in this area. Once you get to this point, we wouldn't really be changing anything.
Can you show option 1C with that? On there.
This is option 1C.
Okay, thank you.
So. Climate with. What other recommendations do we want to make towards the bridge? This side of it, like the right.
No. The alignment, the height of the entering the bridge.
Like the clearance under it?
Yes.
Okay.
It appears to me that, the height of the bridge, the roadbed would be raised with any of the new poses. I was thinking keeping it close to where it's at now.
Is that the case, Kyle, that the elevation of the bridge will be increased if we keep the alignment?
Let me look back at our profile. I think it does increase some to keep the bridge out of the floodplain. I can give you an order of magnitude.
Oh, okay.
Kyle, a couple minutes ago, you briefly mentioned something that I think is important to share, is that as the reduced widths to 28 feet and or possibly 24 feet are studied, that is really only going to be bringing in the impacts for a portion of the overall project site closer to the bridge. And you briefly mentioned that, but it might be helpful to point those areas out a little bit.
Yeah, I can. To Wendy's point, you can see that we transition out of the bridge width over a pretty short distance, the shortest distance allowable. And so by reducing the width of the bridge, we're really not changing the impacts beyond, maybe this point. The impact will only really be changing in this area.
So for the board, we made a vote on a maximum of 28 feet, and then we had further discussion on that. I think we need to either rescind that motion or
Rescind it to what?
The motion passed.
the motion passed, and then we discussed it a little further about the 24 feet. Because I just want
We said maximum.
28 feet maximum. Okay. Everybody in agreement on that? Okay. So,
We want the bridge to be as narrow as possible, but with a maximum of 28 feet is what I intended in my motion to say.
I think that's clear.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so I think we can, so, Don, you mentioned the elevation and the decision made on that.
Well, I'm basing that on some of the artists' conceptions. It looked like quite a highway in the pictures that were shown. I would like to see it pretty much the way it is now, as far as elevation crossing the river. I can't imagine the floodplain. The bridge is quite high now. I don't know, water ever got that high that I'm aware of. I'm not sure. I mean, no, it's nowhere close.
But he did say that there's a trade-off. The higher you go, the less impact there is during construction.
How is that? Why is that?
That is when you're looking at the options that shift the alignment over, because the ground line over on this area is higher than the existing road. So if you put the road back at the same elevation, you'd have to cut down further, which would take, more distance then to grade out and tie back into the existing grade. So by raising the profile to more closely approximate the existing contours, the existing ground lines, you reduce the impacts.
I don't know if I understand, but I don't build bridges, but the road is there now. Are you saying they're gonna change?
This is for the options that shift the roadway to the north.
Yeah.
Because the ground line to the north is higher. Like if you're driving on Swallow Falls and you're heading towards the park entrance, you can see that the ground slopes up to your right.
So Kyle, if we're looking at the current alignment, is the height of the bridge a moot point?
If you put it on the current alignment, yeah, it's not really a big topic.
We want to discuss the materials of the railing, because there was some discussions of options on that, and so we can make a recommendation for that.
I think that's something that
I mean, just whatever makes the least amount of repair.
I
cost
agree, and then like, we don't have to impact the environment again,
Yes.
so that would be the comments.
Right. Okay, so.
you want to have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion.
Then I second.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. So, we have an alignment, maximum width, material. Let's see if there's anything, feel like it needs.
The alignment, the way I see it, the alignment is Calvin. The way I see it, the alignment would stay the same as it is now, right? Is that correct?
Well, that's the two options that we're discussing. If you close the road, you put the alignment back where it is now. If you maintain traffic, you shift the alignment to the north.
Yeah. I think we, voted on that. We want to keep it the way it is. That was our suggestion.
And then I think lastly, we did second timeline stuff. Not that we have much control over that, but I think
Seems to me, I'm talking.
that you mentioned. What you're
You
talking
need
about,
to
if
when the
you've got-
ground's frozen or when it's dry.
I don't know how well
Those
you
are
construct
kind of-
concrete, but I guess you have pre-forms and stuff or a pre-made bridge. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how.
That would go to whatever, Kyle and GPI on that. But I think if we're looking at recommendations, we should recommend a, time that construction that have the least amount of impact.
Can you make that in the form of a motion?
Least amount of impact environmentally or
Yes.
convenience.
Environmental.
We have a second.
Every summertime.
We have a second.
A second.
All in favor? Or is there any more discussion?
I think being more specific on that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to discuss it. Is it when the ground is frozen or is it in the summertime when it's more dry?
I think you're the expert as far as that's concerned, like recommendation wise.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to look at the area, I guess. That could make a recommendation right now, looking at it. Doing more research, but
I think the ground most likely be frozen January, February, maybe some March, but that's a short period too.
yeah,
My opinion is that would only lengthen the construction period and
it could go south on you as well, if it's not frozen.
Yeah, exactly. And a good chance it will go south.
Yeah, at least for a week or two, freeze and thaw is what we've been getting. So I would probably recommend summer right now.
Yeah.
Well, that and then that wasn't for the school buses that we discussed, and also we would keep it towards the earlier part of the season, the farm would have buses, that hopefully would, be less. And that hopefully,
I'll make that motion.
make a motion for specifically that.
For, we're looking for June through August, we're talking a 3-month period, is that right, Kyle?
That's like an item.
That's perfect.
Yeah, 3 to 6 months. 3 months best case.
Second, what's the motion?
From May to
Yeah, maybe May, starting in May,
May to September.
yeah, May, 3 to 6 months.
So motion for,
Recommend
because
construction.
construction will begin in May for 3 to 6 months.
Is there a second? Any further discussion?
So someone had mentioned like a question about the debris, construction debris, what's the plan for that as far as removal of all of that, is that included, I assume it would be, but
That's considered in every project.
I think it's out of our.
That's just part of compliance.
Okay. All in favor? Here,
Okay, so we have with materials, timeline. So, any other part of this recommendation? Review? Let's. You know, and then.
Okay. Do we have any more discussion on the bridge, or is our recommendation? Something I brought up earlier, my fortune, and is when do we meet? How often do we meet? Why do we meet? My feeling is we should meet at least once a year. And we should get information from DNR as to what is going on in the court. We need to know about it. And if we do, then I think we should be made aware. I realize we're a county board, but I think it would be reasonable to meet at least once a year.
I agree that this board should meet on a more regular basis than as needed. And also to keep the board active and, you know, aware of any potential issues and also I think in terms of, planning, I think we could.
Would you like to put that in a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that the board meet at least once a year.
Second? Second. Any further discussion?
Don, I have to say that the first meeting, I'm the one that procrastinated, and yes, I had time to reflect over this last week, reread the management plan, reread the code. I think it's actually critical that we meet. I mean, I'm thinking more than once a year, but at least annually, and it will be important that we can engage with DNR and other stakeholders. And if nothing more, be a sponge to absorb what is going on out there and then to be able to formulate some recommendations for a program.
Is there any other comments?
That's in addition to as needed, I assume, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, just have a regular annual meeting and then, you know, we just have, we need to follow up or issues, or something we want to make a decision on.
All right. We call for the question.
And I'm assuming like we had a meeting this year, but if we have any more, so we're trying to aim for July.
Yeah, as needed, right? Yeah.
Well, that or the annual one could be in July.
That'd be good.
Okay.
We didn't discuss who could call the meeting. Do we need to talk about that?
We say it was as needed was through the county.
Or DNR, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we kind of serve to be best of both. The county commissioners has respected what I call a scenic corridor. DNR with respect to the office.
And the chairman, I think, should be able to call it. If there's an issue out there that maybe it's not recognized by the DNR or the county. We still ought to be able to convene to give a red flag up. If something's going on.
I like that.
I think if we look at the management plan, it calls for that, Jeff. If the chair, you call me.
I don't remember that part, especially with the county, you know.
But
It's very, it
I
gets,
think we should include it just so we're clear.
yeah. Okay, can we have a motion?
I make a motion that the county commissioners, the DNR or the chairman, chairperson.
We have a second.
Call meeting to order.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Then I think Are we on public comment again?
John?
Couple of quick comments, sorry about that. First of all, thank you again for engaging with the community. DNR, it's great to have Sarah here, but DNR has 2 or 3 people that are directly responsible for the river, and I think it might be helpful for them to give you all a briefing as to what they're up to. At least 2 or 3.
Put them on our agenda.
Well, that's up to you all, but I'm just suggesting that. The other thing is that. Just a personal comment. The bridge renderings that were put up today, the 2, the concrete and the steel. I don't think were very attractive, and another personal comment, and I don't think they were representative of the area. I think I sent each of you some renderings from a former director of the Youghiogheny River with DNR. There are all kinds of bridges that are extremely attractive, but that fit into a rural community. I've been around enough engineering studies over my lifetime in public office that this is what happens. You don't like what they give you, so they give you the worst that they possibly can. I've been through this. And I just think you all ought to reconsider, but you've already made the motions. So there's nothing I can do, but you know, when you look at other rural communities with a sense of history that Swallow Falls has, it seems to me you could do a lot better. But thank you for what you're doing.
I agree with the former gentleman in front of me. Okay. I think it looks terrible. It's way too commercial. There's not enough input to the community as to the looks and working with the state roads. I know your plan. I worked with you guys before. That's why you got a gap. I saved over 2,000 acres from Maryland state parks. And the gap was put in. So you can move. And this committee needs to look at that. You're a strong voice of the committee. And you need to look at them and tell them of what's going to happen. This isn't the first thing. Because I was there when the Wild and Scenic was coming on the log books. And with this gentleman. And they stopped. And we saved 2,000 acres of parkland that the state road said they were going to take through Flintstone. So you need to redesign, go back. If I had my say so, we put a duck line there. Okay, keeping the contours of what it is. Pedestrians and bicycles don't take 28 feet. Hang them off to the side. Okay. Work off a substructure. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But when you limit your meetings to just once a year, you cut the public at it. I will offer you, I own the Crelling Community. I will offer you that building to hold your meetings there. Okay. I work with the school, I work with the people in the community, and you cut me off. And I don't appreciate that. You represent the public. You need more than one meeting. When we were doing the yacht corridor, I filled up out of Deep Creek Lake. We stayed till midnight working at the colors of buildings, what there were, and people like yourself, property owners. I just got old, I'm sorry. But you need to listen to the public, not to them. Listen to people like me and this gentleman right here. You need to open up, and one meeting a year won't do it. Everybody's busy. But I'll guarantee you, if you open it up, the people will come. I think you need to take a look at it. Keep it down to where it is, 24 feet as a structure. put a bike path and pedestrians off to the side. And concrete and barriers that we're talking about, we're not at on 219. The governor took the parks and even said they weren't gonna go in and bring chainsaws into the park to keep from ruling communities. I go along with that, that bulldozers in some parts. This road is in the city park, it needs to stay that the people around it want. Everything you see here is from the state roads. I thank you for your time.
Steve?
I think it's interesting, Kyle made a comment last week that the design group engaged the stakeholders in this design. And I know they didn't consult you all, and I think the management, the advisory board for the YOC is an important stakeholder who represents the public. So I'm glad that that's changed as a requirement in the law, but I would like to say I'm thrilled. I know this wasn't glamorous, but I think that the recommendations that you're making, I would agree with the gentleman. I like the second half of the width statement that you made, as narrow as needed. Maximum 28 is what Glendale looks like. Glendale is one of the most hideous bridges in the county as far as I'm concerned. It looks like a highway. That's what we're actually at with your recommendations. Shifting a bit to where it is now saves the largest portion of this. 2.4 acres, 223 trees. The wetland difference is 300 square feet. I'm thrilled that your meeting voted to meet at least once a year. After 17 years of no meetings, it keeps the body going. But I do agree it would be, having maybe an open house once a year in addition to that, where folks can come and bring their own issues. The other thing is I'd like to say is I hope that the state and the county will engage this group sooner. Don made a comment last week. I feel like we're late in the game to this, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent on these plans that we're looking at. If they consulted this group early on and gotten some real public input, hopefully there would have been some savings. Last year, $4.7 million was allocated to a high development trail. You guys could have been involved in it early on and saved a lot of embarrassment, saved a lot of stress for the community. So I really hope that the state and the county take that into consideration. You can, as according to the law, you actually can convene yourselves. It's in the law. So I'm glad you voted to have the chairman reinforce the law. I will say, I know that there is another trail proposed, Oakland to Harrington Manor. I worked on it. It's actually referenced in the management plan as an area in the scenic corridor that allows and encourages recreational development. I would hope at some new meeting that you could meet with Garrett Trails. I'd be happy to do the presentation, but I can't build the trail. Sierra is working on some things I know, but that would be something that's upcoming that you could change complete 360, right? Instead of being late in the game and not even being consulted, you can be early in the process and be engaged and give some advice. So a lot of money isn't wasted in our community. A lot of stress is made. Thank you all for your service. I hope to join you someday on this board, but for now, I'll stand here and support you. I'm super excited. Thank you so much.
Can I follow up on Steve's comment? So, I want to manage expectations, so we did put in, state highway bike grant for a feasibility study of connecting Oakland and Harrington Manor. So, and have a public input, but yeah, I think this board should be involved in that, so keep you posted, but fingers crossed that we get grant money.
Another comment.
Yeah, one last comment.
Guys, I just want to say, I really do appreciate you all getting together. Everyone spent 2 hours of your time and really paint the target on yourselves for open comment, and it's not easy to be in that situation. I think this committee has the utmost responsibility and power. I don't think you guys realize how much power you have over what happens in the corridor based on the regulations. And I think the guidance I would just caution you on making motions and packing them a little too hastily, because then it's a done deal. You know, I'll give a good example, like my kids are at the fair right now. If I tell them they can spend $50, they will spend 51. So when we say a minimum of 28, the state will look at that as 28. And what I got from Kyle was 28 is the inside of the bridge. The actual bridge is gonna be probably 32 or 34. So when we're talking about the impact, I think all those things need to be considered before we make a decision or before we make a recommendation, because. And Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, but where you're looking at that significant disturbance. But I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. I think everyone has the same goal. To me, one thing I would caution is, I know the economic development of the county is very important. But the draw, as a new resident, I'm probably the youngest resident of the neighborhood here, right? Been only here for 13 years. I love driving across that temporary bridge. Y'all talking about that temporary bridge? I love it. It's such a cool bridge. We always stop and always look at the rapids and keep going. You put concrete barriers, you take the entire beauty of that area gone. If there was a way to keep the temporary bridge, I'd say keep it. That bridge and the Sangamon Bridge down the street from our house, two of my favorite bridges. Just because you can actually enjoy the scenery. So yeah, that I think, was it you, Steve, that said 219 bridge is one of the most aesthetic bridges. You know, I only had an idea of a covered bridge or something cool with lattice on the side that when you're driving across, you can actually see the scenic beauty, because that's what we're trying to preserve. We're not trying to promote bike traffic, pedestrian, and I understand that in the future. But I think we're trying to preserve the beauty and the simplicity of what Swallow Falls and Hamilton Manor is. I think that needs to be kept in mind.
Well, I can tell you, the concrete. In my mind, I was thinking about damage to the bridge. Maybe I bought into that. But anyway, I really, I said it before, the bridge over Deep Creek on the Sangamon Road is more in line with what we need as far as looks. It has side railings that are metal, they're actually stacked. There's one above the other. And I don't think it would be hard to replace those if it was damaged, because there's that picture there shows pretty much what we have there, except they are in one place in the center of the bridge are too high. I mean, physically too high. Not height wise, but they have two rail stacks on another. So anyway, that in my mind, I don't know that, I'm thinking DNR gets to make final decision, no matter what we do. DNR is going to make the final decision. And in the past, maybe there were some mistakes, but I know when the management plan was developed, we had a gentleman by the name of John Wilson, and he stood strong. He was not very articulate, in my opinion. He was more like me. So, but he did a super job. He was very sincere.
He's well aware of your meeting and he's willing to come and talk to you. He's been in touch with a lot of people, including the secretary and the commissioners. He's written letters, and that's what I say. And he was there at the beginning. 40 years ago, he was a guy I was dealing with. He was a young man then, so was I, but that's a long time ago. But anyways, so there are people, the people at DNR now don't have any historical background, but they're still assigned the Wild and Scenic River. That's their job. John Wilson and Paul Durham, who many of you may know as the Deep Creek Lake manager a long time ago. He also was there at the beginning. So these are people that could brief you. And I think it would be very helpful to give you a historical perspective on this stuff.
John was beat on very harshly during.
Yes, he
the-
was. Yes, he
the,
was. Living by me, but, you know, on different issues.
Yeah,
It's a long story, but that Carter at one time was 8,000 acres.
right.
The wild corridor. Now it's down to 4,000, but it took George and I a lot of time to get that down to 4,000 acres because of the visual corridor. There's a lot of stuff that would be helpful. I think you remember, Don, but there's a lot of stuff that could be helpful to you in your deliberation. I agree with the doctor. Sometimes watch your motions, you know, give it time or table it to another meeting. You know, I mean, you know, it's just a suggestion.
To Steve's comment, though, it would be easier in that regard if we would have been brought in earlier.
I agree, but 17 years ago, you know, and as you remember, at the hearing on July 26th, whenever it was, DNR said it's not my responsibility. The county said it's not my responsibility. And then Commissioner Tichenel said, we're going to take responsibility and get the board moving. That's what happened. I appreciate what y'all are doing. Y'all are in a tough position. You know, but I still wouldn't rush it. You know, that's the key. You know, you can always table motions, you can rescind motions. You can meet in another week or two to think about it. I don't know how much this bridge is gonna cost, and there's so many options that can be considered. Do you need to take the federal money? Can the state help you out? Can the county do it? I don't know. I don't know the numbers. But there are things that I don't just pay attention to what the feds say. If you listen to the engineers, and you know, as I said, they're gonna give you their best shot. But you all are the citizen representatives here. You make the decisions, not them. Or you recommend decisions, I should say, to the county. Remember, you still have to deal with commissioners. And I think there's gonna be an issue regarding closing the bridge or not closing the bridge. I think you all are gonna have to deal with farmers that are not gonna be crazy about closing the bridge. So, you know, it's just something to think about.
That's a tough thing, closing the bridge, and I know we have one particular farmer who is.
Well, you've also got,
Large.
well, I'm not gonna get in, you've got one or two commissioners that are interested in that matter too. And you know,
Well,
From my position on this board, that's a non-negotiable.
no, I understand.
Yeah.
You're one person.
Right.
See, that's, you know,
I had to deal with, personally, I had to deal with the closure on the Oakland Sangerun Road. I had to deal with two closures on the Sangerun Road. So, you know, I mean, it happens and we just have to do it. I'm sorry, you know. And it affected me in the fact getting hay equipment into my property, although it's not large scale like some of the others. You know, I didn't have a choice.
you were at the hearing on the 26th and you heard the farmer that has 400 head of cattle or whatever, and he has land on both sides of that bridge and he's got to move equipment and so forth. Fourth generation farmer, you know, I mean, you guys are and women are in a tough situation, you know. But that's what you advise.
Josh?
I have one comment. My name is Josh Spiker. I'm a resident of Sangerun. I was raised there. I still live there. And when the age of 11, we were turned loose from Small Falls. Trenton. There's been a narrative push in the past couple of years that there's somehow pristine wilderness between those two places. If that's the case, I have yet to find it since I was 11 years old. So I think the board needs to take a look at what actually exists there, as opposed to people's fanciful ideas of what they'd like. So as you make your decisions in the future, you make it based on reality. That you understand there are logging roads all through there. That you understand that generations of private landowners at their own cost kept sediment out of that river. That you understand that four-wheelers and ATVs are still coming off private property right down the border. Right next to, right up to National Falls. Now, if you don't understand any of those things, or you don't have a sense of context for them, I'm happy to go down with you. I'm happy to share it. you want to walk from San Bruno to Friendsville, you let me know. And we'll do that. And that way, when you make your decisions in the future, at least for that section, you know what's there, not what we all think should be there. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Can I offer one bit of clarification and some questions? It seems like there's been a lot of comments about aesthetics. I just want to make sure that, I understand what it is people are hoping to see. So the county's intention here was to, give people a bridge that they'd be happy with and like the aesthetics of. Clearly the first stab wasn't what people wanted to see. So I have a better idea moving forward about what it was about besides the width and the sidewalk, what about the previous aesthetic was dissatisfying, then I can offer better recommendations moving forward. I've heard some comments that people like to be able to see out through the barriers as they're driving. And that was cited as a reason that they like the steel railings. There are concrete railings that you can build that have intermittent posts, so there are gaps that you can see through. So that would not be an option that's off the table. Plain barriers don't need to be left out there. The form liner that was shown in the renderings, isn't appealing. There are thousands of different types of form liner out there that could be selected instead. If there's, specific aesthetics that people are looking for, that could certainly be considered. And then I just wanted to talk about the federal funding part of it. I think that's a bit overstated. The width of the bridge, if the county was going to do it without federal funding, I'd get the sense that they'd still want to stick to a 28-foot wide for future maintenance perspective. So I don't think there's a change there. And, counties for liability reasons should be using mesh compliant railings anyway. So I don't get the sense that there's any difference there. The big difference with the federal funding is more permitting oversight through the NEPA process.
Thank you, Kyle.
Any other discussion? We hear a motion to adjourn. Second. On favor?
Thank you, Kyle.
Absolutely.
I actually, so that far, I know they're